Jack Miller's alarm was set for 5:50 a.m., but his eyes had been open since 4:47, tracking the rhythm of his daughter's breathing through the baby monitor on the nightstand. 42 years old, and his body still moved like a soldier's, efficient, economical, always ready. The habits from before never died. The hypervigilance, the inability to rest completely, the need to confirm every few hours that Lily was still breathing, still safe, still there in the small bedroom across the hall of their rented duplex. He silenced the alarm 3 minutes early and swung his legs out of bed bare feet, finding cool hardwood. The mirror in the bathroom showed what 5 years of single fatherhood looked like. Gray, threading through dark hair at the temples, lines carved deeper around eyes that had seen too much, shoulders that carried weight, even when standing still. The shower ran cold for the first 30 seconds. Jack didn't mind. He'd learned to find comfort in discomfort, to trust only what he could control. Hot water was luxury. Clean water was necessity. The distinction mattered when you'd spent enough time in places where neither was guaranteed. By 6:15, he was dressed worn jeans, faded flannel shirt over thermal steel-toed boots that had seen better years. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the small kitchen with the one scent that made this rented space feel remotely like home. He poured the first cup into a travel mug, then started a second pot. Lily would be up soon, and morning rituals mattered to 4-year-olds the way coordinates mattered to artillery units, absolute and non-negotiable. The duplex was small but clean. Jack kept it that way with military precision, not because he was naturally tidy, but because chaos in the environment meant chaos in the mind, and he couldn't afford chaos. Not with Lily depending on him. The living room held the second-hand couch, a coffee table he'd refinished himself, and a corner dedicated entirely to his daughter's kingdom, plastic castle stuffed animals arranged with careful hierarchy, art supplies in labeled bins. On the wall hung exactly 3 photographs, one of Lily at 2 years old, gap-toothed and covered in birthday cake, one of Jack and Sarah on their wedding day, young and stupid with hope, and one of all 3 of them taken 6 months before the diagnosis, before cancer turned Sarah's smile into something brave and brittle, before Jack learned that some battles you couldn't win no matter how hard you fought. He didn't look at that last photograph much anymore. The grief had dulled from a knife edge to a constant ache, manageable as long as he stayed in motion, stayed useful, stayed focused on the one person who still needed him. The small voice came from the hallway, accompanied by the shuffle of footed pajamas on hardwood. Jack turned to find Lily standing in the kitchen doorway, blonde hair sleep-tangled, clutching the stuffed elephant that went everywhere she did. He crouched down, opening his arms, and she patted over to collapse against his chest with the full-body trust that children gave so freely and adults learned to withhold. "Morning, Buttercup." She burrowed into his shoulder, still half asleep, and Jack felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the overwhelming weight of responsibility mixed with something so pure it hurt. This was why he woke up. Why he pushed through exhaustion, why he'd learned to live again after Sarah died. He carried her to the kitchen table and set her down gently, then moved to the stove. Pancakes this morning. Mickey Mouse shaped a skill he'd taught himself through YouTube videos during those first terrible months when Lily would cry for her mother, and Jack had no idea how to comfort her, except through small acts of devotion. The batter sizzled on the griddle, and Lily perked up, recognizing the sound. "Daddy's making, Mickey." "That's right, sweetheart. And then we need to get you ready for school." She nodded seriously, swinging her legs under the table. At 4 years old, she was already perceptive in ways that scared him sometimes. She'd ask questions he didn't know how to answer. "Where is Mommy now? Why can't she come back? Does she still love me?" Jack answered as honestly as he could, the way Sarah would have wanted, even when the words felt like swallowing glass. They ate together in comfortable silence, then went through the morning routine, getting dressed, brushing teeth, packing her small backpack with a juice box and crackers for snack time. By 700, they were in his truck, a Ford F-150 that was older than his military service but ran solid because Jack maintained it himself. Money was tight on a construction worker's salary, but he'd learned which corners could be cut and which couldn't. Lily's safety wasn't negotiable. Her education wasn't negotiable. Everything else was just noise. Sunrise Daycare sat in a converted house on the east side of Capitol Hill, painted cheerful yellow with a fenced playground out back. Ms. Patricia was already at the door waving as Jack pulled up. He walked Lily inside, crouching down one more time to kiss her forehead. "Be good today, okay? I'll pick you up right at 5. "I'm always good, Daddy." He smiled despite the weight in his chest. She was right. She was always good, almost unnaturally well-behaved for a 4-year-old, and that worried him too. Kids were supposed to test boundaries. Lily seemed afraid to push too hard, as if she understood on some level that her father was barely holding everything together. She ran off to join the other children, and Jack stood there a moment longer than necessary, watching through the window, until Miss Patricia noticed and gave him a gentle nod. "You can go. She's safe here." He forced himself back to the truck. The drive to Morningside Brew took 12 minutes in morning traffic. Jack had been stopping there for the past 6 months, long enough that Rachel, the manager, knew his order before he reached the counter. "Large black coffee, 1 croissant." "You got it." The cafe was small and warm, filled with the scent of fresh brewed coffee and the hiss of the espresso machine. A handful of early risers occupied the scattered tables, a woman working on a laptop, an older man reading the newspaper, a couple sharing pastries in the corner booth. Jack collected his order, and claimed his usual spot near the back wall. Old habits. Always put your back to something solid. Always know where the exits are. The Army had drilled those lessons deep, and PTSD kept them current. He was halfway through his croissant when the door opened and she walked in. Evelyn Cross didn't enter spaces she commanded them. Tall, elegant, dressed in a gray Armani suit that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent, she moved with the kind of confidence that came from years of making decisions that affected thousands of people. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she held her phone to her ear, voice crisp with authority. "No, David. I was clear in the email. The acquisition has to close by Friday or we walk. I don't care what their board says, those are our terms." She ended the call without waiting for a response and stepped to the counter. Every other customer had glanced up when she entered, that instinctive recognition of power, but Evelyn seemed not to notice. Rachel took her order, a cappuccino with oat milk, and Evelyn moved to a table near Jack's, still absorbed in her phone. Jack went back to his coffee, glancing at the clock on the wall. He had 15 minutes before he needed to be at the Morrison construction site, where his crew was starting demo work on a commercial renovation downtown. The money was steady, the work honest, and his boss, Jim Morrison, was fair. That was enough. Jack had stopped hoping for more than enough a long time ago. The door opened again. The man who walked in wore a suit that was expensive in a different way, tailored perfectly, paired with a Rolex that caught the morning light. His hair was slicked back with too much product, and he moved through the cafe like he owned it, heading straight for Evelyn's table without hesitation. Jack's instincts, honed through 12 years in the Army and 3 tours overseas, started screaming before the man even spoke. He'd seen that walk before, that posture, that particular kind of entitlement that came from men who'd never been told no and wouldn't accept it when they were. The predator's casual confidence as he approached prey. Marcus Brooks slid into the chair across from Evelyn without asking permission, and Jack saw her stiffen. "Evelyn, we need to talk about the quarterly report, and about dinner last night, the one you missed." Her voice was ice, professional, contained, but Jack heard the edge underneath. "Marcus, I'm working, and I already told you I don't have dinner with subordinates outside of company events." Marcus leaned back, smile never reaching his eyes. He was handsome in the way that powerful men often were: polished, groomed, radiating the kind of self-assurance that money and position provided. But there was something rotten underneath, something Jack recognized from darker places, from men who'd abused their authority in ways that left scars. "Subordinate, come on, Evelyn. I'm the COO. We both know I'm more than that. I'm your partner." He placed his hand on the table, fingers inching toward hers. Not touching yet, but the intent was clear. Invasive. Possessive. Crossing a boundary she'd already established. Evelyn pulled her hand back. When she spoke again, her voice was sharp enough to cut. "Remove your hand, Marcus. Now!" But Marcus didn't move. Instead, he lowered his voice to something that probably sounded intimate to anyone not paying attention, but felt threatening to anyone who was. "Don't think you can treat me like this forever. I'm very patient, but I'm not infinite. You're making a scene. People are watching." Jack's jaw tightened. He wasn't the only one watching. Now Rachel had paused mid-pour at the espresso machine, and the woman with the laptop had looked up. But nobody was moving. Nobody was intervening. That was how these things worked. People saw, people knew something was wrong, but the calculation happened fast. "Not my business, don't want trouble, she's probably handling it." Evelyn stood gathering her phone and bag. Her composure was impressive, but Jack could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped her belongings just a fraction too tight. "This conversation is over." Marcus stood too faster, positioning himself between Evelyn and the door. His hand shot out and caught her shoulder, not violently but firmly enough to stop her movement. The gesture was practiced, the kind of casual control that suggested this wasn't the first time. "Sit down, Evelyn. You're being dramatic. We're just having a conversation." Something inside Jack broke loose, not the rage he'd learned to manage after coming home from war, but something colder and more focused. He'd spent 5 years trying to be invisible, trying to keep his head down and protect Lily by avoiding complications. But watching Marcus Brooks put his hands on a woman who'd clearly refused him, watching other people in this cafe pretend not to see. Jack stood. His chair scraped against the floor loud in the sudden quiet. "You need to take your hand off her, right now." The words came out calm, measured, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Marcus turned, and Jack saw the calculation happen in the other man's eyes, taking in the worn jeans, the flannel shirt, the calloused hands of someone who worked with tools instead of spreadsheets. Dismissing him. "This doesn't concern you, friend." Jack took one step closer. Not aggressive, but deliberate. He'd learned a long time ago that violence was about commitment, not size. About being willing to follow through when the other person wasn't. And right now, looking at Marcus Brooks's manicured hands still gripping Evelyn's shoulder, Jack was absolutely willing. "She told you to let go. You didn't. So now I'm telling you, take your hand off her or I'll make you." The cafe had gone completely silent. Rachel had her phone in her hand now, finger hovering over the keypad. The laptop woman was recording on her phone, holding it low but steady. And Evelyn was perfectly still, watching Jack with an expression he couldn't quite read. Surprise maybe, or confusion about why a stranger was stepping in when everyone else had looked away. Marcus finally released Evelyn's shoulder, turning to face Jack fully. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, and clearly spent time in a gym. But gym muscles were different from work muscles, and Marcus had never had to fight for anything real in his life. Jack could see it in his stance, in the way he puffed up, trying to look intimidating. "Do you know who I am?" Jack's voice stayed flat, emotionless, the tone he'd used giving orders to men under fire. "I know you're the kind of man who puts hands on women when they say no. That's all I need to know." Color rose in Marcus's face. Anger, humiliation at being challenged in public, and something else, the realization that Jack wasn't going to back down, and that Marcus had no idea what to do with someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought. You're making a huge mistake. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Jack stepped close enough that Marcus had to choose escalate or retreat. And whatever else Marcus Brooks was, he wasn't stupid enough to throw a punch in a public cafe with witnesses recording. And you don't know who you're dealing with either. But if you don't leave right now, you're about to find out. The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds, though it felt longer. Finally, Marcus took a step back, smoothing his suit jacket in a gesture that was meant to look casual but came across as defensive. Evelyn, we'll continue this conversation at the office. And you, he looked at Jack with pure hatred. You just made an enemy you can't afford. He turned and walked out the door, chiming as it closed behind him. The cafe seemed to exhale collectively, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Jack turned to Evelyn, suddenly aware that adrenaline was coursing through his system, hands shaking slightly with the aftermath of controlled aggression. She was staring at him, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked uncertain. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Jack shook his head, already uncomfortable with the attention. This was why he tried to stay invisible. This was exactly the kind of complication he'd been avoiding for 5 years. You don't need to say anything. He was out of line. Someone should have stepped in sooner. She studied him for a moment, and Jack had the uncomfortable sensation of being assessed by someone very intelligent who was used to reading people accurately. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy something, because she reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. I'm Evelyn Cross, and I'd like to thank you properly. Jack glanced at the card. Evelyn Cross, CEO, Cross Technologies. He'd heard of the company, one of Denver's major tech firms valued in the billions. The woman he'd just defended wasn't just wealthy. She was powerful in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. I'm Jack Miller, and I don't need thanks. Just did what anyone should have done. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Everyone else in this cafe had chosen to look away. He'd been the only one who couldn't. Evelyn's expression shifted slightly, something like respect in her eyes. Most people wouldn't have. Can I at least buy you a coffee? Another one, I mean. Jack picked up his travel mug from the table, checking the time. He was going to be late to the site now. I appreciate it, but I have to get to work. Take care of yourself, Ms. Cross. He headed for the door, acutely aware of her gaze following him. Rachel called out as he passed the counter. That was brave, Jack. He didn't feel brave. He felt exposed, like he'd just painted a target on his back by getting involved in something that wasn't his business. But when he thought about walking past, about letting Marcus Brooks intimidate that woman while everyone else pretended not to notice, no. He'd made the right choice. It just might have been the stupidest right choice of his life. The Morrison construction site was already in full swing when Jack arrived, 20 minutes late. Jim Morrison looked up from the blueprints spread across a makeshift table, eyebrow raised. You're never late, Jack. Everything okay? Just a thing. Won't happen again. Jim studied him for a moment, then nodded. That was one of the things Jack appreciated about his boss. The man knew when to push and when to let something go. They'd served together back before Jack had left the service to take care of Sarah during her final year. Jim understood the silences, the careful boundaries Jack maintained. The work was good for Jack's head. Swinging a sledgehammer, tearing out old drywall, the physical exhaustion that made it easier to sleep at night. His crew was small Tom Rodriguez, a veteran like Jack who'd found his way into construction after coming home, and 3 younger guys who worked hard and didn't ask too many questions. They respected Jack because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and because he was fair in a world that often wasn't. Tom sidled up during lunch break, unwrapping a sandwich his wife had packed. Heard you had some excitement this morning. Jack shot him a look. How the hell do you know about that already? Tom grinned, pulling out his phone. It's all over social media, man. Construction worker defends businesswoman from aggressive executive. Someone posted the video. You're practically viral. He turned the phone screen toward Jack, who felt his stomach drop. Sure enough, there was footage from the laptop woman's phone, grainy, but clear enough to show Marcus putting his hand on Evelyn, Jack standing up the confrontation. The caption read, "This is what real men look like. Hashtag not all heroes should stand up." Shit. Tom laughed. Relax. You're the good guy here. People love this stuff. But Jack wasn't worried about being the good guy. He was worried about Marcus Brooks seeing this, about whatever consequences the man had promised, about his carefully maintained low profile being shattered because he couldn't just mind his own business for once. The rest of the day dragged. Every time Jack's phone buzzed, he tensed, expecting what? A lawsuit, threats. But the messages were just the usual: a text from Ms. Patricia, confirming pickup time, a reminder about Lily's doctor appointment next week. Tom sending him a meme about construction work. He picked Lily up at exactly 5 o'clock, and her face lit up when she saw him. That pure, uncomplicated joy made everything else fade into background noise. This was what mattered. Not viral videos or powerful people or past lives he'd left behind, just this little girl who depended on him completely and loved him without reservation. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home, Lily riding in the cart and pointing out items she thought they needed. Jack had learned to involve her in these decisions to make her feel like she had some control over their small world. She picked out vegetables for dinner: broccoli and carrots, and he let her choose between chicken and fish. She chose chicken, and he added it to the cart along with pasta and the ingredients for sauce. At home, they cooked together. Jack had taught himself to be competent in the kitchen out of necessity, and now it was one of their rituals. Lily stood on a stool next to him, carefully stirring the sauce while he seasoned the chicken. She chattered about her day at daycare, about the blocks she'd built with another girl named Emma, about how Ms. Patricia had read them a story about elephants. After dinner, they played for an hour. Lily wanted to build a castle for her stuffed animals, so Jack helped her construct an elaborate fortress out of couch cushions and blankets. Then, bath time, story time. The careful routine that marked the transition from day to night. By 8 o'clock, she was tucked into bed, eyes already drooping. "Daddy, you know how much I love you. How much, Buttercup?" She spread her arms as wide as they'd go. "This much, times infinity." Jack kissed her forehead, throat tight. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Sleep good." "Okay. Okay. Love you, Daddy." He left her door cracked open, the night light casting soft shadows, and retreated to the living room. The apartment felt too quiet suddenly, the way it always did after Lily fell asleep. This was the dangerous time when memories crept in uninvited. Sarah laughing at something stupid he'd said. Sarah weak in the hospital bed, holding Lily one last time. Sarah making him promise that he wouldn't let grief define their daughter's life. He'd kept that promise mostly. Lily was happy. She felt loved. She had stability and routine and everything a 4-year-old needed. But Jack himself, he'd been existing rather than living, going through motions because they kept him busy enough not to think too hard about the emptiness. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Jack almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Miller, this is Jennifer Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Evelyn Cross." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "How did you get my number?" "Rachel at Morningside Brew. I hope you don't mind. Ms. Cross was quite insistent about being able to thank you properly." There was warmth in Jennifer's voice, professional but genuine. "She'd like to invite you to coffee tomorrow morning. Same place, same time, just to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Mr. Miller, I understand if you're uncomfortable, but Ms. Cross wanted me to assure you this isn't about business complications. She genuinely just wants to express her gratitude and perhaps discuss something that might be mutually beneficial." That last phrase set off alarm bells. Jack had learned to be suspicious of mutually beneficial offers from people who lived in entirely different worlds. "I appreciate the call, but I'm not interested." There was a pause. When Jennifer spoke again, her tone had shifted slightly less polished, more human. "Between you and me, Mr. Miller, what you did this morning took real courage. Ms. Cross doesn't trust easily and she doesn't ask for help, but she's asking now. Just one conversation. If you're still not interested after that, she'll respect your wishes." Jack thought about it. Thought about Marcus Brooks and his threats. Thought about Evelyn Cross and the way she'd looked at him. Not grateful exactly, but curious, like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve. Thought about the fact that he'd already stepped into this mess and walking away now wouldn't make it go away. 20 minutes. That's all I can spare before work. Thank you, Mr. Miller. 8 o'clock tomorrow at Morningside Brew. After she hung up, Jack sat in the dark living room wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The smart move was to stay away to let Evelyn Cross return to her world of technology companies and billion-dollar deals while he stayed in his world of construction sites and daycare pickup. Their paths shouldn't have crossed at all, but they had. And something told Jack that pretending otherwise was going to be impossible. He checked on Lily one more time before bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever complications arose from this morning's decision keeping her safe, was the only thing that truly mattered. Everything else was just details. The next morning, Jack was at Morningside Brew by 7:55, already regretting this. He ordered his usual coffee and claimed the same back table, positioning himself so he could see the entrance. Evelyn Cross arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, but this time she was alone. No phone call, no urgent business, just a woman in a navy blazer and slacks who moved with slightly less armor than yesterday. She spotted him immediately and walked over, carrying a cappuccino. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming. 20 minutes like I said. I have a job site at 8:30. She sat down across from him, and Jack noticed details he'd missed yesterday during the confrontation. The faint shadows under her eyes suggesting she didn't sleep much. The way her fingers wrapped around the coffee cup like she was drawing warmth from it. The absence of a wedding ring, though, there was a pale band of skin on her left hand that suggested one had been there recently. "I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday. What Marcus did. It wasn't the first time he's crossed a line, but it was the first time anyone intervened." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Other people should have stepped in sooner." "But they didn't. You did. And I've been thinking about why." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You're a veteran, aren't you? The way you moved, the way you assessed the situation, that's not civilian training. 12 years Army. Got out 5 years ago when my wife got sick. I'm sorry." "Don't be. She's gone. We deal with it." The bluntness seemed to surprise her, but Jack had learned that dancing around Sarah's death made it worse. Better to state it plainly and move on. Evelyn set down her coffee, meeting his eyes directly. "Mr. Miller, Jack. Jack, I looked into you after yesterday. I hope that doesn't offend you, but I needed to understand who put himself between me and someone like Marcus Brooks." She pulled a folder from her bag, sliding it across the table. "Morrison Construction is about to bid on a major renovation project for Cross Technologies. $3 million, 6-month timeline. We need a foreman who's detail-oriented, experienced, and absolutely trustworthy." Jack stared at the folder without touching it. "And you're offering me this because I helped you in a coffee shop?" "I'm offering you this because after reviewing your military record and talking to Jim Morrison, I know you're the best person for the job. The fact that you helped me proves you have integrity. The fact that you're sitting here suspicious of my motives proves you're not easily manipulated." She leaned forward slightly. "Jack, I'm not doing this out of gratitude. I'm doing this because I need someone I can trust, and trust is in very short supply in my world right now. Marcus works for you. He's my COO. Or he was. I'm in the process of building a case to terminate him, but it's complicated. He has allies on the board. He's been with the company for 7 years. She took a breath, and Jack saw something crack in her composure. Yesterday wasn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern, and I'm tired of pretending it's not happening. Jack processed this, turning the coffee cup in his hands. The smart move was still to walk away, but he thought about Lily, about the opportunities this kind of money could provide. $85,000 a year instead of 52. Actual savings. Maybe even a house instead of a rented duplex. If I take this job, it's because I'm qualified, not because of what happened yesterday. Understood. And if I don't perform, you fire me. No special treatment. Agreed. And you keep your personal problems away from the work site. I don't need drama following me to the job. Something flickered across Evelyn's face, hurt maybe, or recognition of how harsh that sounded. But she nodded. Fair enough. Jack opened the folder, scanning the project details. Renovation of 5 floors in the Cross Technologies building, new office layouts, updated conference rooms, modern cafeteria. It was significant work, the kind that could make or break a foreman's reputation. If he pulled it off successfully, it would open doors. If he failed, I need to talk to Jim first. Make sure he's okay with this. Of course, he's already been contacted about the bid. He'll know you're being considered for foreman. Jack stood the folder tucked under his arm. His coffee sat half-finished on the table, and Evelyn looked up at him with an expression that was hard to read. Hope mixed with wariness, like she wasn't sure if she'd just made a brilliant decision or a terrible mistake. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. He made it to the door before her voice stopped him. Jack, what you did yesterday, standing up when no one else would, that's rare. Don't let people convince you it was foolish. He didn't answer, just pushed through the door into the Denver morning. But as he drove to the job site, he couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn Cross, about the careful walls she'd built around herself, about the way she'd looked at Marcus Brooks, not afraid exactly, but exhausted by the fight. He knew that feeling. The weight of constant vigilance, of never being able to let your guard down. Jim Morrison was waiting when Jack arrived, leaning against his truck with a knowing smile. So, Evelyn Cross offered you the foreman position on the renovation. You knew. She called yesterday afternoon. Wanted my opinion on whether you could handle a project that size. Jim crossed his arms, still smiling. I told her you're the best worker I've got and the most stubborn son of a bitch I've ever met. Also said if you turn this down because you're too proud to accept help, I'll kick your ass myself. Jack huffed out something that might have been a laugh. It's not help, it's a job offer, and you're suspicious because of how it came about. I get it, Jack, but here's the thing, you earned this. Not through what happened at that coffee shop, but through 5 years of showing up early, working hard, and never cutting corners. Evelyn Cross is smart enough to recognize quality when she sees it. Or she's trying to pay off a debt. Does it matter? Jim pushed off the truck, clapping Jack on the shoulder. This is a chance to provide better for Lily, to build something that could lead to bigger opportunities. You going to let pride get in the way of that? The words hit harder than Jack wanted to admit. Pride had kept him afloat these past 5 years, had given him something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. But pride didn't put food on the table. Pride didn't pay for better schools or emergency funds or the 100 things Lily would need as she grew up. I'll call her this afternoon. Good man. The workday passed in a blur of physical labor that was almost meditative. Jack demolished a load-bearing wall under Jim's supervision, the methodical swing of the sledgehammer exactly what his head needed. Tom worked beside him, not asking questions but providing steady companionship. By lunch, Jack had made his decision. He called the number on Evelyn's business card during his break, half expecting to get an assistant. Instead, she answered directly. This is Evelyn Cross. It's Jack Miller. I'm in, for the foreman position. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, he could hear relief in her voice. I'm glad. When can you start? Morrison needs 2 weeks to transition the current project. After that, I'm yours. Perfect. I'll have Jennifer send over the contract details. Another pause. Thank you, Jack. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if I actually deliver first. I have a feeling you will. After hanging up, Jack sat in his truck staring at the construction site through the windshield. He'd just made a decision that was going to change everything. His income, his work, his proximity to a world he'd been carefully avoiding. And he'd done it, despite every instinct screaming that getting involved with Evelyn Cross was dangerous in ways he couldn't fully anticipate. But he'd also done it for Lily, for the chance to give her more than just enough, for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could build something better than the bare minimum survival he'd been accepting as sufficient. That night after Lily was asleep, Jack pulled out the folder Evelyn had given him and studied the project specifications in detail. The scope was ambitious: complete renovation, while the building remained partially occupied. Strict timelines, quality standards that would require precision and planning. It was exactly the kind of challenge he'd once thrived on back when he was leading teams in hostile territory where one mistake could cost lives. Different stakes now. Nobody was shooting at him, but the pressure was real and the consequences of failure would be measured in reputation and opportunity, rather than casualties. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus Brooks. Enjoy your new job while it lasts. You made a powerful enemy, and I don't forget." Jack stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Threats were just noise. What mattered was execution. He'd agreed to do a job, and he'd do it well. Whatever Marcus Brooks wanted to throw at him, Jack had survived worse. He checked on Lily one more time, watching her sleep with that elephant clutched tight against her chest. Sarah's eyes. Sarah's smile, but her own fierce spirit. She deserved a father who took risks when they were worth taking, who fought for better even when it was scary. The alarm would go off in 6 hours. Jack would wake before it like always, and the routine would begin again. But something had shifted. The careful isolation he'd built around their lives had cracked, and he wasn't entirely sure if that was disaster or opportunity. Only time would tell. The Cross Technologies building rose 12 stories above downtown Denver, all glass and steel reflecting morning clouds. Jack arrived at 6:30 on his first day, an hour before the rest of the Morrison crew was scheduled to show up. He wanted to walk the space alone to understand what he'd agreed to before other eyes were watching. Jennifer Chen met him in the lobby, professional smile in place, but something warmer underneath. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Cross asked me to give you a complete tour before your team arrives." The elevator ride to the 8th floor was silent except for the mechanical hum. Jennifer led him through halls that still smelled like new carpet and corporate ambition, pointing out the 5 floors marked for renovation. The scope was bigger than the folder had suggested, not just cosmetic updates, but structural changes. New electrical systems, upgraded HVAC. 6 months suddenly felt optimistic. They ended in what would become the main conference area, currently just exposed concrete and dangling wires. Ms. Cross will want to check in periodically. She's very hands-on with projects she cares about. Jack examined the support beams, noting stress points and load distribution. She cares about this one, she cares about getting it right. Jennifer hesitated, then continued. And she cares about the people who work here feeling safe. This renovation, it's partly about modernizing, but it's also about changing the culture, making a statement. Jack understood, without her spelling it out. Marcus Brooks had created an environment where people didn't feel protected. This renovation was Evelyn's way of literally rebuilding trust. The crew arrived at 7:30. Tom Rodriguez and the 3 younger guys from Morrison, plus 2 new hires Jack would need to assess quickly. He gathered them in the empty space that would become the cafeteria, laying out expectations that were military clear. Show up on time, work hard. No shortcuts. Safety first always. They'd have 6 months to complete work that should take 8, which meant precision and efficiency couldn't be optional. Tom pulled him aside after the briefing. "This is a big deal, Jack. You ready? Ask me again in 6 months. The first week was pure logistics coordinating material deliveries, setting up temporary walls to isolate construction zones, establishing protocols for working in an occupied building. Jack found himself interacting with cross-technologies employees more than he'd anticipated, explaining timelines and managing concerns about noise and dust. Most were polite professional. A few were curious about the foreman who'd defended their CEO in a viral video. One of them was Marcus Brooks. Jack was reviewing blueprints in a cleared section of the 9th floor when Marcus appeared, suit immaculate, expression carefully neutral. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there radiating calculated menace until Jack acknowledged him. Something I can help you with. Marcus took a few steps closer, hands in his pockets. Everything about his posture designed to look casual while being anything but. Just checking on the renovation progress. Making sure our new foreman is up to the task. We're on schedule. Good, good. Marcus circled the space, slowly examining the exposed infrastructure. You know I looked into you after our encounter. Jack Miller, 42, widower, single father, struggling to make ends meet on a construction worker's salary. Then suddenly, miraculously, you get promoted to foreman on a $3 million project. Quite the stroke of luck. Jack kept his voice level, not rising to the bait. I'm qualified for the job. I'm sure Evelyn told you that. She's very good at making people feel valued, special, like they matter to her personally. Marcus stopped directly in front of Jack, smile sharp as broken glass. But here's what you need to understand, you're not special. You're a charity case. A project she took on to make herself feel better about her complicated relationship with power. When you stop being useful, when the novelty wears off, you'll be discarded, like everyone else who made the mistake of thinking Evelyn Cross actually cares about anything besides herself and her company. Every word was designed to wound, to plant seeds of doubt. Jack had been through psychological operations training. He recognized manipulation when he saw it. You finished? Almost. One more thing. Marcus leaned in, voice dropping to something intimate and threatening. Stay away from Evelyn. Whatever you think is happening between you, it's not. She's using you. And when I'm done building my case against her little rescue mission, you'll be back where you belong, invisible and irrelevant. He walked away before Jack could respond, leaving behind the acrid tang of expensive cologne and cheaper threats. Tom appeared from around a corner, having clearly overheard at least part of the exchange. That guy's a real piece of work. He's scared. People say stupid things when they're scared. But Marcus's words stuck in Jack's head for the rest of the day, burrowing into the insecurities he'd been carrying since accepting this job. Was he a charity case? Had Evelyn offered him this position out of genuine respect for his abilities, or out of guilt and gratitude that would eventually expire? The questions gnawed at him through lunch, through the afternoon's work coordinating electrical contractors, through the drive to pick up Lily from daycare. She sensed something was off the moment he buckled her into the truck. You're sad, Daddy. Just tired, Buttercup. Long day. Did someone be mean to you? Kids were too perceptive. Jack forced a smile he didn't feel. Nobody important. How was your day? She launched into a detailed account of building blocks and story time, her voice a lifeline pulling him back from the dark spiral Marcus had tried to create. This was what mattered, not the opinion of a man whose power came from intimidation and manipulation, not the doubts about whether he deserved this opportunity. Just this little girl who depended on him to be strong and present and whole. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Jack's phone rang. Evelyn Cross, according to the caller ID. He almost didn't answer, suddenly uncertain about what talking to her outside of work hours meant. But curiosity won. This is Jack. Hi. I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to check in. Jennifer said the first week went well, but I like to hear it directly from the people doing the work. Her voice sounded different outside the professional context, less armored, more human. Jack walked onto the small back porch, keeping his voice low so it wouldn't wake Lily. We're on track. Crew's solid. No major issues so far. Good. That's really good. A pause. Marcus came to see you today. It wasn't a question. Someone had told her, or she'd seen it on security cameras. Jack appreciated that she wasn't pretending ignorance. He did. Made some threats, said some things designed to make me doubt myself. Standard intimidation tactics. I'm sorry. He shouldn't have access to the construction areas. I'll make sure. Don't. Jack cut her off gentler than he meant to. Restricting his access makes it look like I need protection. I don't. He's just noise. He's dangerous, Jack. Not physically, but in other ways. He knows how to find pressure points and exploit them. So do I. Difference is I use that knowledge to protect people instead of hurting them. Another pause, longer this time. When Evelyn spoke again, her voice carried a weight that suggested she was saying something she didn't say often. I've been thinking about what you said about keeping my personal problems away from the work site. You were right to set that boundary. But I want you to know that if Marcus escalates, if he does anything that affects your job or your safety, I need to know. Not because you're a charity case or a rescue project, but because you're someone I respect who doesn't deserve to be collateral damage in a war he started. The words hit harder than Jack expected. He realized he'd been bracing for confirmation of Marcus's accusations, for some sign that this whole arrangement was about Evelyn's guilt rather than genuine professional respect. Her directness disarmed him. Why me for this job? The real reason. I told you you're qualified. There are a lot of qualified foremen in Denver. Why specifically me? Evelyn was quiet for so long that Jack thought the call had dropped. Then, because when Marcus put his hands on me in that cafe, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Helpless. Vulnerable. Like all my power and money and position meant nothing in the face of physical intimidation. And then you stood up. You didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything from me. You just intervened. Because it was right. I've spent the last 8 years surrounded by people who calculate every action based on personal benefit. You didn't calculate. You just acted. That kind of integrity is rare, Jack. And yes, it made me want to know more about you. Made me want to work with someone who doesn't have an angle. Jack gripped the porch railing, processing this level of honesty from someone who probably spent most of her life being strategic about every word. Everyone has an angle. What's yours? Providing for my daughter, keeping her safe and happy. That's it. That's the only thing I want. Then we're aligned. Because what I want is to build a company where people like you can do good work without being harassed or undermined or made to feel like they don't matter. She took a breath. I'm not using you, Jack. I'm respecting you. There's a difference. After the call ended, Jack stood on the porch watching Denver's lights spread across the valley. Something had shifted in his understanding of Evelyn Cross. She wasn't just a billionaire CEO playing at gratitude. She was someone fighting her own battles against systems designed to protect men like Marcus Brooks, and she'd recognized in Jack a potential ally. Not a subordinate, not a charity project. An equal in a fight neither of them had chosen, but both were committed to winning. The renovation work intensified over the following weeks. Jack pushed his crew hard but fairly, and they responded by exceeding every timeline he set. Tom proved invaluable as second-in-command, reading Jack's management style and translating it for the younger workers who hadn't learned military efficiency. The space began transforming from industrial skeleton to functional workplace, walls rising and systems integrating with a precision that impressed even the skeptical Cross Technologies employees who'd doubted Morrison Construction could deliver. Evelyn visited the site regularly, always professional but increasingly comfortable in her hard hat and safety vest. She asked intelligent questions about structural decisions and material choices, clearly having done research to understand construction beyond surface details. Jack found himself looking forward to these inspections not because of any attraction. He was careful to maintain strict professional boundaries, but because she challenged his thinking in ways that made him better at his job. During one such visit, she paused in what would become the main conference room, running her hand along a support beam that Jack had insisted be exposed rather than covered. "Why did you fight for this?" The original plans had it enclosed. "Because hiding the structure doesn't make the building stronger. People should see what's holding everything up." Reminds them that appearance and reality aren't always the same thing. She looked at him with something approaching admiration. "That's unexpectedly philosophical for a construction foreman." "You'd be surprised what you learn tearing things down and building them back up." The moment stretched, charged with an understanding that went beyond professional respect. Then Jennifer appeared with some crisis that needed Evelyn's attention, and the spell broke. But Jack felt it, the dangerous pull toward someone whose world was so different from his own that any connection was destined to complicate everything. He tried to ignore it, focused on work, on Lily, on maintaining the careful compartmentalization that kept his life manageable. But Evelyn kept showing up, kept asking questions that made him think deeper, kept looking at him like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve not for advantage but for genuine curiosity. 3 months into the project, Tom pulled him aside after the crew had left for the day. "You know she's into you, right?" Jack's jaw tightened. "We're professionals, that's it." "Man, I've known you for 5 years. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her, and she's not exactly subtle about wanting to spend time around you. She's checking on her investment. $3 million is a lot of money. She trusts you. The checking in is just an excuse." Tom leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I'm not saying you should do anything about it. Your life, your choice. But pretending there's nothing there isn't going to make it go away." After Tom left, Jack stayed late reviewing the next week's schedule, trying to lose himself in logistics and timelines. But his mind kept circling back to moments that felt like more than professional collaboration. Evelyn's laugh when he made a dry observation about corporate culture. The way she'd touched his arm once briefly when thanking him for solving a design problem. The fact that she'd started timing her site visits to coincide with moments when his crew was gone and they could talk without audience. He was playing with fire. He knew it. Single father, barely stable, getting involved with a billionaire CEO while her dangerous COO was looking for any excuse to destroy both of them. It was the definition of stupid. But Jack also knew what it felt like to be so focused on survival that you forgot to actually live. Sarah had made him promise in those final weeks that he wouldn't let grief turn him into a ghost, that he'd find happiness again even if it scared him. Especially if it scared him. His phone rang. Lily's daycare. Ms. Patricia sounded apologetic. "Mr. Miller, I'm so sorry to bother you, but Lily's running a fever. Not serious, but she should go home." Jack was already grabbing his keys. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He made it in 12, taking corners faster than he should have. Ms. Patricia met him at the door with Lily, who looked small and miserable, cheeks flushed and eyes glassy. "Daddy, I don't feel good." "I know, Buttercup. Let's get you home." He carried her to the truck, mentally calculating he'd need to leave the site early tomorrow to take her to the pediatrician, which meant rearranging the electrical inspection, which meant coordinating with Tom to cover the afternoon walkthrough with the city inspector. Single parenthood was a constant juggling act where one disruption cascaded into a dozen complications. At home, he got her settled on the couch with her stuffed elephant and a cool washcloth for her forehead. Her temperature was 101, not dangerous, but concerning enough that sleep wouldn't come easy for either of them. He texted Tom about covering tomorrow's inspection, then called the pediatrician's office to arrange an appointment. While Lily dozed fitfully, Jack did what he'd learned to do during Sarah's illness, broke the crisis into manageable tasks. Fluids, temperature monitoring, comfort. Everything else could wait. This was what mattered, being present for his daughter when she needed him most. His phone buzzed. Evelyn asking about a timeline question. Jack started to type a response, then stopped. Called instead. "Hi, I'm sorry I can't talk about work right now. Lily's sick." Concern immediately colored her voice. "Is she okay? Do you need anything?" "She'll be fine, just a fever, but I have to stay with her tonight, and I'll need to miss the morning inspection tomorrow to take her to the doctor." "Of course, don't even think about work. Is there anything I can do?" "Groceries delivered, medicine?" The offer caught him off guard. This wasn't CEO to employee protocol. This was genuine worry from someone who understood what single parenthood looked like. "We're okay. Tom's covering the inspection. I'll be back as soon as she's cleared." "Jack?" Her voice softened in a way he'd never heard before. "Take care of your daughter. The renovation can wait." "She can't." After hanging up, Jack stared at his phone, processing the complexity of his feelings. Gratitude. Confusion. A dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with professional respect and everything to do with being seen, truly seen by someone who had every reason to only care about project timelines and budget impacts. Lily stirred, reaching for him without opening her eyes. He gathered her into his lap, resting his chin on top of her head while she mumbled something incoherent. This was his world. This small apartment, this sick child, the constant weight of responsibility for another human being who depended on him completely. But for the first time in 5 years, he felt the edges of that world expanding, making room for possibilities he'd locked away after Sarah died. It terrified him. The idea of opening up, of letting someone in, of risking the fragile stability he'd built through sheer force of will. Lily's fever broke around midnight. Jack dozed in the chair beside her bed, waking every hour to check her temperature. By morning, she was cooler, more alert, demanding pancakes with a recovery speed that only children possessed. He made the pancakes, called to schedule that doctor's appointment, and texted Tom an update. The pediatrician confirmed it was just a virus rest and fluids for a few days. Jack kept Lily home from daycare, setting her up with coloring books and quiet activities, while he worked remotely, coordinating with his crew via phone and video calls. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. What wasn't manageable was the delivery that arrived at 2:00 p.m. Jennifer Chen stood at his door, holding an enormous basket filled with children's books, coloring supplies, stuffed animals, and a card. Jack stared at it, then at her. "What is this?" "Ms. Cross wanted to send something for Lily. She remembered you mentioning your daughter likes elephants, so—" Jennifer gestured to the plush elephant wearing a tiny hard hat that sat prominently in the basket. Jack's throat tightened. Evelyn had been listening, had remembered a throwaway comment about Lily's stuffed elephant, had taken time during what he knew was an insanely busy period to arrange this gesture. It was thoughtful in a way that went beyond appropriate employer behavior and into territory that made his chest ache. Tell her thank you. You could tell her yourself. She'd like that." After Jennifer left, Jack brought the basket inside. Lily's eyes went wide. "Daddy, what's that?" "A present. From my boss. Because she heard you were sick." Lily dove into the basket with 4-year-old enthusiasm, pulling out each item to examine. When she found the elephant with the hard hat, she squealed, "She has a hat like yours. What's her name?" "I don't know. What do you think?" Lily considered seriously. "Evie. Like Daddy's friend Evelyn." Something in Jack's chest cracked open. He watched his daughter cuddle both elephants, chattering about how Evie would keep her original elephant company, and realized with startling clarity that he was in trouble. Not the manageable kind that came from difficult construction projects or tight timelines. The kind that came from falling for someone who existed in a completely different universe, whose gesture of kindness had just connected their worlds in a way he couldn't undo even if he wanted to. That evening, after Lily fell asleep clutching both elephants, Jack called Evelyn. She answered immediately. "How is she?" "Better. The fever broke. She loved the basket." "Thank you. I'm glad. I wasn't sure if it was overstepping, but Jennifer said it would be okay." "It was perfect." Jack paused, gathering courage. "You named the elephant right. Lily called her Evie, said she's my friend Evelyn." A soft laugh on the other end. "Is that what I am, your friend?" The question hung in the air, weighted with implications neither of them had been willing to address directly. Jack thought about boundaries and complications about Marcus Brooks and their vastly different worlds, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about Sarah's voice in those final days. "Don't let fear make you small. Promise me you'll live, not just survive." "I'd like you to be." The words came out rougher than intended. "If that's something you want too." Silence. Then, "I do. Want that. More than I probably should." "Why shouldn't you?" "Because I'm your employer. Because Marcus is looking for any vulnerability to exploit. Because every relationship I've had since building this company has been transactional in some way, and I don't want that with you. I want—" She trailed off, seemingly surprised by her own honesty. "I want something real. But I don't know if that's fair to ask when the power dynamic is so unbalanced." Jack understood the concern, but he also understood that tiptoeing around attraction to protect some theoretical purity was its own form of dishonesty. The power imbalance exists whether we acknowledge what's happening or not. Maybe being honest about it is actually the more balanced approach. That's either very wise, or we're both rationalizing something we know is complicated. Can't it be both? Her laugh was surprised and genuine. "Yes, I suppose it can." They talked for another hour, conversation flowing easier now that the unspoken thing had been named. She told him about the pressure of running a company built by her father, about imposter syndrome that never went away, no matter how much success she achieved. He told her about the guilt of sometimes being relieved Sarah was gone because caring for her those final months had been so exhausting, about fearing he was screwing up Lily's childhood by being too protective. It was the kind of conversation that couldn't happen between employer and employee, between billionaire and construction worker. It required setting aside those identities and just being two people who'd found unexpected connection. When they finally said goodnight, Jack felt lighter than he had in years, and more terrified, because now there was something to lose beyond just a job. The renovation entered its fourth month, with Jack splitting his attention between managing the increasingly complex work and navigating whatever was developing with Evelyn. They were careful. No public displays, no gossip-worthy moments at the worksite. But the tension was there, electric and obvious to anyone paying attention. Tom definitely noticed. He cornered Jack one afternoon after watching Evelyn spend 30 minutes discussing conference room acoustics in a way that had nothing to do with actual acoustics. "You two are killing me with this professional restraint thing. Just admit you're into each other and deal with the consequences." "It's not that simple." "It never is. But you're both adults. She's single. You're single. And the only person who'd have a problem with it is Marcus Brooks, who already has a problem with both of you existing. So what are you actually afraid of?" Jack was saved from answering by his phone ringing. Unknown number, but something made him answer. "Mr. Miller, this is Detective Sarah Reeves with Denver PD. I'm calling about a complaint filed against you regarding child welfare." The world tilted. Jack gripped the phone tighter. "What complaint?" "An anonymous tip suggested your daughter might be in an unsafe environment. Someone expressed concern about your mental health, specifically untreated PTSD from military service, and whether it affects your parenting ability. Child Protective Services will be conducting a home visit within the next week." Pure rage flooded through Jack, hot and clarifying. This was Marcus. Had to be. using the one weapon that could actually hurt him, threatening Lily's safety, weaponizing Jack's military service and the struggles that came with it. My daughter is perfectly safe. She's healthy, happy, and well cared for. I'm sure that's true, Mr. Miller. The investigation is just routine. Please expect a call from CPS to arrange the visit. And I'd recommend having documentation ready. Pediatrician records, daycare evaluations, anything that demonstrates your fitness as a guardian. After she hung up, Jack stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. Tom was watching with concern. What happened? Someone filed a complaint with CPS. They're going to investigate whether Lily's safe with me. That's insane. You're the best father I know. But Jack was already moving, already planning. He needed to call the pediatrician, get records, contact Ms. Patricia for a written evaluation, document everything about Lily's life that proved she was thriving. And he needed to tell Evelyn, because this wasn't just about him anymore. This was retaliation for their connection, and she deserved to know that being associated with him now came with collateral damage. He found her in her office 2 hours later, still in the hard hat from her site visit, but back behind the massive desk that emphasized the distance between their worlds. When she saw his face, she immediately stood. What's wrong? Someone filed a complaint with CPS. Anonymous tip claiming I'm unfit to parent because of PTSD. They're doing a home investigation. Evelyn's expression shifted from concern to cold fury. Marcus? Has to be. He threatened consequences. This is what he meant. She came around the desk, and for a moment Jack thought she might reach for him. Instead, she pulled out her phone, already dialing. Catherine Morrison, Evelyn Cross. I need an emergency consultation. She listened briefly. Family law, child welfare defense. Yes, tonight if possible. After arranging the meeting, she finally looked at Jack directly. We'll fight this. Catherine is the best family attorney in Denver. She'll help you document everything, prepare for the investigation. This is harassment and we can prove it. This is because of me, because I stood up for you in that cafe, because I took this job, because we... He gestured between them, unable to finish. No. Her voice was steel. This is because Marcus Brooks is an abuser who's losing control and lashing out at anyone who threatens his power. You're not responsible for his choices. But Jack felt the weight anyway. Lily was his world, his reason for existing, and now she was being dragged into something ugly because he hadn't been able to maintain invisibility. Because he'd let someone in. Because for a few weeks he'd forgotten that opening yourself to connection meant opening yourself to pain. That evening, after dropping Lily with Tom's wife, who'd offered immediately when she heard what was happening, Jack met with Catherine Morrison in her downtown office. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional, asking questions that were invasive but necessary. Medical records, income, housing, daily routines, Lily's development milestones, his PTSD treatment history. The last one was where things got complicated. You were diagnosed with PTSD after your service. Yes, mild case. I did therapy for 18 months after discharge. Current treatment. I manage it. Haven't needed medication in 3 years. Catherine made note, his expression neutral. The complaint specifically mentions untreated PTSD. We'll need documentation showing you sought treatment and that your condition doesn't impair your parenting. Letters from your therapist, your commanding officers. Anyone who can speak to your stability. Jack provided contact information, but inside he was churning. This was exactly what Marcus wanted, forcing Jack to expose every vulnerability to justify his right to raise his own daughter, to prove worthiness to strangers who had no idea what he'd sacrificed or survived. Evelyn had come to the meeting despite Jack suggesting she didn't need to, sitting quietly in the corner while Catherine conducted her interview. Now she spoke up. I can provide a character reference. Jack has been exemplary in his work, reliable, detail-oriented. His crew respects him. The project is ahead of schedule despite significant challenges. Catherine looked between them, clearly reading subtext. Cross, if you're involved romantically with Mr. Miller, your testimony might actually complicate things. The complaint includes insinuations about inappropriate relationships affecting his judgment. The words landed like stones. Jack saw Evelyn process what that meant, that their connection, however careful they'd been, was now ammunition Marcus could use. That trying to help might actually hurt. We're friends, professional colleagues, her voice carried conviction. Nothing inappropriate. Catherine didn't look convinced, but she wrote it down. After the meeting, Jack walked Evelyn to her car in the parking garage. The space echoed with their footsteps, harsh fluorescent lighting stripping away any warmth. This is my fault. She turned sharply. Stop. Marcus made this choice. Not you, not us. But what if we hadn't become friends? If you hadn't taken a job you were qualified for? If I hadn't dared to care about someone outside my carefully controlled circle? She stepped closer, and Jack could see exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of fighting battles on multiple fronts. I won't apologize for that. And you shouldn't either. Lily could be taken from me because I couldn't stay invisible. Lily is safe because she has a father who loves her and provides for her and would do anything to protect her. That's what CPS will see, not whatever poison Marcus is trying to spread. Jack wanted to believe her, but fear had wrapped cold fingers around his chest, squeezing until breathing felt difficult. He'd survived war and loss and grief that should have destroyed him, but the thought of losing Lily, of failing Sarah's trust in the most fundamental way, was terror beyond anything combat had provided. Evelyn must have seen it in his face because she did something she'd never done before. She reached out and took his hand, brief, but grounding. You're not alone in this fight. Whatever you need, I'm here. The touch lasted only seconds before she pulled back, professional distance reimposing itself. But Jack felt the imprint, the promise of alliance that went beyond employer-employee or even friendship into something neither of them was ready to name. The CPS investigator arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Ms. Anderson was professional and thorough, examining every room of the duplex, checking for safety hazards, reviewing the documentation Jack had prepared. She interviewed Lily separately. Age-appropriate questions about whether she felt safe, whether Daddy ever got angry or scared her, whether she had enough to eat and clean clothes. Jack waited in the kitchen, nerves scraped raw, while his 4-year-old daughter was questioned by a stranger about whether her father was fit to raise her. Every parenting mistake he'd ever made replayed in his head. The times he'd been short with her because exhaustion won. The moments he'd cried and she'd witnessed it. The gaps between who he wanted to be and who he actually managed to be on his worst days. Ms. Anderson emerged with Lily after 20 minutes. His daughter ran to him immediately and he scooped her up, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Daddy, she asked me lots of questions. Did I do good? You did perfect, Buttercup. Ms. Anderson reviewed her notes, face revealing nothing. Mr. Miller, based on my investigation, I see no evidence supporting the complaint filed against you. Your home is clean and safe. Lily is well cared for, age-appropriate in development, and clearly bonded with you. Her daycare reports are excellent. Your pediatrician confirms regular checkups with no concerns. She closed her folder. I'll be filing a report recommending this case be closed without further action. The anonymous complaint appears to lack merit. Relief hit so hard that Jack's knees weakened. He managed to stay standing, managed to thank Ms. Anderson professionally, managed to wait until she left before collapsing onto the couch with Lily still in his arms. Why are you shaking, Daddy? Just tired, sweetheart. But I'm okay. We're okay. That night after Lily fell asleep, Jack called Evelyn. She answered before the first ring finished. The investigation's closed. They found nothing wrong. Her exhale was audible. Thank God. I've been checking my phone every 5 minutes. Marcus tried to take my daughter using lies. That's... Jack couldn't finish, rage and relief mixing into something that tasted like battery acid. That's who he is. Someone who weaponizes vulnerability. But he failed Jack. You passed every test, and now we have documentation of his harassment. What do you mean? Catherine filed a police report connecting the anonymous complaint to Marcus. It's circumstantial, but it establishes pattern. When combined with the other evidence we're collecting... She paused. I'm building a case to terminate him. Not just for what he did at the cafe, but for systematic harassment of employees, misuse of company resources, and now attempting to harm you through false accusations. It's going to take time, but I will remove him. I promise you that. Jack heard the steel in her voice, the absolute conviction of someone who'd been pushed past patience into cold determination. Be careful. He's already proven he'll go after anyone close to you. I know, but I'm not afraid anymore. He showed his hand by going after Lily. That was his mistake. They talked until late, Jack finally allowing himself to feel the full spectrum of what the past week had put him through. Fear and rage and relief and something else, gratitude for having someone who understood stakes beyond quarterly earnings and project timelines. Someone who saw him as a person worth fighting for, not because it benefited her, but because it was right. When they finally said goodnight, Jack checked on Lily one more time. She slept peacefully. Elephant with a hard hat tucked under one arm, completely unaware of how close she'd come to being collateral damage in someone else's power struggle. He'd protected her. Barely. But the system had worked. Documentation had mattered, and she was still his. The renovation entered its final 2 months with renewed intensity. Jack pushed his crew harder, determined to finish not just on time, but early, to prove that Marcus's interference hadn't derailed anything. The space transformed into something genuinely impressive, modern but warm, functional, but beautiful. Evelyn visited almost daily, now no longer pretending it was purely professional oversight. They'd coffee together in the incomplete cafeteria, talking about everything except the growing inevitability between them. One afternoon, she brought Lily to see the site after daycare. Jack hadn't planned it, but Evelyn had suggested it, and Lily had begged, and watching his daughter's wide-eyed wonder as she explored wearing a child-sized hard hat that Evelyn had somehow acquired made his chest tight. Daddy, you built all this, me and my team, yeah. It's so big. Can I work here when I grow up? Evelyn crouched down to Lily's level. You can be anything you want. Architect, engineer, CEO, construction worker like your dad. Whatever makes you happy. Lily considered this seriously. I think I want to be like Daddy. He builds things that help people. The words hit Jack harder than they should have. He'd spent 5 years trying to be enough, questioning every decision, wondering if survival mode parenting was damaging her somehow. And here was his daughter proud of what he did, seeing value in work that society often dismissed as unskilled labor. After Lily ran off to examine the new conference room windows, Evelyn stood beside Jack, both of them watching her explore. She's remarkable. You should be proud. I'm terrified every day that I'm failing her. That's how you know you're a good parent. The bad ones never worry. They stood in comfortable silence until Lily came racing back, breathless with excitement about all the things she'd discovered. Evelyn offered to buy them dinner. Nothing fancy, just burgers at a place nearby, and Jack agreed before thinking about optics or complications. Sometimes you just said yes to good things, even when they scared you. At the restaurant, Lily charmed Evelyn with 4-year-old logic and unfiltered observations. She asked about Evelyn's job, whether being a boss was hard if she ever got to play during work. Evelyn answered each question seriously, never condescending, treating Lily like a person whose opinions mattered. Jack watched them interact and felt something dangerous taking root, not just attraction to Evelyn, but the beginnings of imagining a future that included her. Driving home, Lily was quiet until they pulled into their duplex parking lot. "Daddy, is Evelyn your girlfriend?" The question caught him completely off guard. "No, Buttercup. She's my boss and my friend." "But you look at her the way Mommy said people in love look at each other." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Sarah had talked to Lily about love before she died, age-appropriate explanations about how people's hearts could hold many people. But hearing those words now applied to Evelyn made everything real in a way abstract attraction hadn't. "It's complicated, sweetheart. That's what grown-ups say when they're scared." Out of the mouths of children, Jack parked the truck and turned to face his impossibly perceptive daughter. "You're right. I am scared. Because loving someone means they could leave or get hurt or change everything about our life. And I like our life. I like it being just us." Lily thought about this, then reached across and patted his hand with the solemnity of someone much older. "But Mommy said being scared of good things makes you miss them. And Evelyn is good daddy. She makes you smile real smiles instead of pretend ones." Jack felt his throat close. 4 years old and already wiser than he deserved. That night, after Lily was asleep, he texted Evelyn. "My daughter asked if you're my girlfriend. Apparently I look at you the way people in love look at each other." The response came quickly. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that it's complicated, that I'm scared." Another pause longer. "Then me too. But maybe we're both scared of the same thing." "And what's that?" "Finding something real in the middle of all this mess." Jack stared at those words for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. He could deflect, make a joke, retreat into safety, or he could be honest. "I think we already found it. The question is whether we're brave enough to admit it." Her reply was almost instant. "Are you?" The question hung there, demanding truth. Jack thought about Lily's observation about Sarah's voice telling him to live fully about the past 5 years of careful isolation and whether it had actually protected anyone or just created a different kind of prison. He typed, "I want to be, but I need you to understand Lily comes first. Always. If this thing between us puts her at risk in any way I walk, no matter what I feel, I would never ask you to choose differently. She's your priority. As she should be." Jack felt something release in his chest, a knot he'd been carrying since the CPS investigation. Evelyn understood. Not just intellectually, but deeply in a way that meant she wouldn't resent the boundaries Lily's presence required. "So what now?" he typed. "Now we finish this renovation, get you paid, remove Marcus from the equation. Then we figure out what comes next. Together, together." The single word carried more weight than any grand declaration. It was commitment without demanding immediate answers. It was patience mixed with promise. It was exactly what Jack needed when his world still felt precarious. The next morning, he returned to the worksite with something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the desperate, clinging kind that came from trying to survive, but the genuine article, the sense that maybe, possibly, life could expand into something more than just adequate. That he deserved more. That Lily deserved to see her father happy, not just functioning. Tom noticed immediately. "You look different." "Same face I've always had. Different expression on it. Like you finally remembered you're alive instead of just going through motions." Jack didn't deny it. Just picked up his clipboard and surveyed the final punch list items. 2 months left. 8 weeks to finish strong, to prove his competence beyond doubt, to set up whatever came next with a foundation of achievement rather than charity. The work consumed him in the best way, each completed task bringing them closer to the vision Evelyn had described on that first tour. A space where people felt valued and safe, where appearance and reality aligned, where the structure holding everything up was visible and honest. Just like what he was building with Evelyn. Slow and careful and real, the renovation reached completion 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Jack walked through the transformed floors with Tom and the crew checking every detail against their original specifications. The exposed beams they'd fought to keep visible caught afternoon light, creating patterns that shifted as clouds moved across Denver's skyline. Everything was exactly as planned, better, even with small improvements they'd implemented during construction that made the space both functional and inspiring. Evelyn stood in the new main conference room, running her hand along the polished table that seated 20. Her reflection showed in the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Jack caught himself watching her instead of inspecting the finished work. "It's perfect, better than I imagined. Your specifications were solid. We just executed them." She turned, expression carrying weight he couldn't quite identify. "Don't diminish what you accomplished here. You took an ambitious project and delivered excellence. That's leadership, not just execution." The words settled uncomfortably. Jack still struggled with accepting praise, still felt the ghost of Marcus's accusation that he was a charity case rather than genuinely qualified. But the evidence surrounded him. Walls built straight systems, integrated seamlessly, a space transformed from industrial skeleton into something worthy of the company that would occupy it. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Ms. Cross, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes, and Catherine Morrison called. She needs to speak with you before then." Evelyn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Jack recognized the tell by now. Whatever Catherine had to say involved Marcus, and it wasn't going to be pleasant. "I'll call her from the car." "Jack, can we talk tonight, after I deal with this?" "Sure. Text me when you're free." After she left, Tom sidled up beside him. "So when are you two going to stop pretending you're just professional colleagues? When the project officially closes and she's not my employer anymore?" "That's tomorrow. Final inspection is at 9, and then Morrison gets paid, which means you get paid. No more conflict of interest." Jack hadn't let himself think that far ahead. Once the renovation was complete, once the checks cleared and the crew moved on to other jobs, the primary excuse for maintaining distance would evaporate. What replaced it would be terrifying actual relationship territory with all the vulnerability and risk that entailed. His phone buzzed. "Evelyn, board meeting was ambush. Marcus filed formal complaint against me with SEC claiming insider trading and ethics violations. All fabricated, but investigating will take months. He's trying to force me out before I can terminate him." Jack's grip on the phone tightened. He typed back, "What do you need? Meet me at my place tonight. I could use a friend who isn't connected to corporate warfare. Send address." The response came with a location in Cherry Creek, one of Denver's most expensive neighborhoods. Jack stared at it, fully confronting for the first time the material gap between their worlds. His rented duplex could probably fit in her garage, but she'd asked for a friend, not for someone to perform belonging in her environment. So he'd show up as himself, and trust that was enough. That evening, after dropping Lily with Tom's family, who'd become his unofficial support system for moments like this, Jack drove to the address Evelyn had sent. The building was sleek glass and steel doormen and everything. Security called up to confirm his arrival before allowing him into an elevator that required a key card for the penthouse level. Evelyn answered the door in jeans and a sweater, barefoot, looking younger and more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. The apartment behind her was enormous, but surprisingly sparse, expensive furniture arranged with more aesthetic than comfort artwork that screamed interior designer rather than personal taste. It felt like a showroom where someone occasionally slept. "Thank you for coming. I know this is probably weird." "Little bit, but I'm here." She led him to a living room with windows overlooking the entire city, lights spreading across the valley like a circuit board. A bottle of wine sat open on the coffee table, single glass beside it, half empty. "I opened this an hour ago, planning to get drunk and feel sorry for myself. Then I realized I didn't want to do this alone." Jack sat on the couch, maintaining careful distance. "Tell me what happened." The story spilled out in fragments. Marcus had filed an SEC complaint alleging that Evelyn had used insider information to benefit friends, specifically naming the Morrison construction contract and implying kickbacks. It was complete fiction, but the investigation would be public, would damage Cross Technology's reputation, would give board members who'd always doubted her an excuse to push for new leadership. He's not even trying to be subtle anymore. This is scorched earth. If he's going down, he's taking me with him. But you have evidence against him. The harassment documentation, the financial irregularities Catherine found, which I can't use until the investigation is complete, or it looks like retaliation. Meanwhile, he gets to make accusations publicly while I'm gagged by legal process. She drained her wine glass, reaching for the bottle. I've spent 8 years building this company into something that matters. Something that treats people fairly and actually innovates instead of just chasing profit. And one vindictive man might destroy it because I dared to reject him. The bitterness in her voice cut deep. Jack understood fighting for something only to watch it threatened by forces beyond your control. War had taught him that lesson repeatedly, how quickly everything could fall apart despite your best efforts. You're not alone in this fight. The words came out rougher than intended. Whatever happens with the SEC, whatever Marcus throws at you, you have people who know the truth. Your employees. Catherine. Jennifer. Me. She looked at him finally, eyes red-rimmed. Why do you care? You finished the renovation. You got paid. You could walk away from all this mess. Because walking away from people who matter isn't something I do. Not anymore. Jack shifted closer, close enough that their knees almost touched. Sarah made me promise at the end that I wouldn't let fear keep me small. That I'd show Lily what it means to stand by people you care about even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Evelyn's expression crumbled slightly. You care about me? Yes. The single syllable hung between them, loaded with everything they'd been carefully not saying for months. All the professional distance and appropriate boundaries dissolved in the face of simple truth. I care about you too. So much that it scares me. She set down the wine glass with hands that weren't quite steady. I've never been good at relationships. Work always came first. But with you, I find myself thinking about futures that don't involve 80-hour weeks and board meetings. Thinking about what it would be like to have someone who sees me as a person instead of a CEO. I do see you. Have from the beginning. I know. That's what terrifies me. Because if I let myself want you and it falls apart, I don't know if I can survive another loss right now. Jack understood that fear intimately. The vulnerability of opening yourself to someone new, of risking the fragile stability you'd built through sheer determination. But he also understood that some risks were worth taking. I can't promise it won't fall apart. Can't promise I won't screw it up or that complications won't derail everything. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and took her hand. But I can promise I'll be honest. That Lily comes first for me always, and if you can't accept that we shouldn't start, that I'm bringing baggage, grief, and PTSD, and a life that's complicated in ways that have nothing to do with money or status, and that despite all of that, I haven't felt this kind of hope since before Sarah died. Her fingers tightened around his. I can accept Lily being your priority. She should be, and I'm bringing my own baggage, trust issues, and workaholic tendencies, and a family of shareholders who'll have opinions about anything I do, but I want to try, if you're willing to try. The kiss happened slowly, neither of them entirely sure who moved first. It was tentative and searching, tasting like wine and vulnerability. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder than the brief contact warranted, Jack saw his own uncertainty reflected in Evelyn's eyes, the awareness that they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This is really happening. Seems like it. Jack's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, anchoring himself. We should probably talk about logistics. How we handle this publicly, whether we tell people what it means for... She cut him off with another kiss, longer this time, her hands coming up to frame his face. When they finally separated, she was smiling in a way he'd never seen before, unguarded and real. Or we could just be here now and worry about logistics tomorrow. They talked until late, conversations ranging from serious to silly. Evelyn told him about growing up in her father's shadow, about the pressure to prove herself worthy of inheritance. Jack told her about the first time Lily said "Daddy" after Sarah died, about how that single word had pulled him back from the edge of giving up entirely. They discovered shared tastes in music and completely opposite opinions on whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It was the kind of getting-to-know-you conversation that should have happened before kissing, but life rarely followed logical order. Around midnight, Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Tom's wife Lily's, "Asleep here. Stay as long as you need. We've got her." Evelyn saw him check it and immediately tensed. "You should go. I didn't mean to keep you from her. She's fine. Tom's family is basically her second home at this point." But he stood anyway, recognizing the late hour. "I do need to pick her up before morning, though. She gets confused waking up in unfamiliar places." Evelyn walked him to the door, and the goodnight kiss was charged with promise and restraint in equal measure. Driving home through empty Denver streets, Jack felt the surreal quality of the evening settling over him. He'd just started something with a woman whose world was so different from his own that the gap should be unbridgeable. But somehow, it wasn't. Somehow they'd found common ground in shared losses and hard-won strength. The next morning brought final inspection of the renovation. City Inspector, Fire Marshal, and Evelyn's facilities manager all walked through with Jack checking off every requirement. The inspector was particularly impressed with the electrical work, commending Jack's attention to code compliance. By noon, they had all necessary sign-offs. The project was officially complete. Jim Morrison arrived for the final walkthrough, beaming with pride. "This is the best work we've ever done. I'm putting you in for project manager on the next bid we win. You've earned it." The promotion came with a significant raise, enough that Jack could finally consider moving out of the duplex into something Lily could call a real home. Not Cherry Creek expensive, but respectable. Stable. The kind of place where she could have friends over without Jack feeling embarrassed about secondhand furniture and thin walls. Evelyn organized a small celebration for the construction crew in the new cafeteria, providing catering that was far nicer than necessary. She gave a short speech thanking everyone by name, highlighting specific contributions each person had made. When she got to Jack, her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "And our foreman, Jack Miller, who took an ambitious project and delivered something exceptional. This renovation represents what's possible when integrity meets skill." "Thank you." The crew applauded, several of them shooting Jack knowing looks. Tom leaned over and whispered, "You two aren't fooling anyone." After the celebration cleared out, Jack and Evelyn found themselves alone in the completed conference room. The space felt different now that it was finished, less potential and more reality. She stood at the windows, arms crossed, tension evident despite the successful completion. "Catherine called this morning. The SEC investigation is moving forward. They're requesting documents going back 5 years. This is going to consume months of my life." "Will they find anything?" "No, because I haven't done anything wrong, but Marcus knows that doesn't matter. The investigation itself damages my credibility. Board members are already asking if I should step aside temporarily until it's resolved." Jack moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at Denver's skyline. "What do you want to do?" "Fight. I built this company into something good. I'm not handing it over to people who think intimidation and lies are acceptable business strategy." She turned to face him. "But fighting means things might get worse before they get better. Media attention, depositions, my personal life examined for any hint of impropriety, dating my former foreman that's going to raise questions. So we wait. Keep things private until the investigation clears." "Is that what you want?" Jack considered carefully. Part of him appreciated the excuse to move slowly to avoid the scrutiny that would come from publicly dating Evelyn Cross. But another part, the part that had learned hard lessons about regret and lost time, chafed at hiding something real. "I want whatever lets us figure this out without external pressure. But I also want to be honest with Lily. She already knows there's something happening between us. Keeping it secret feels like teaching her to be ashamed of things that matter. Evelyn's expression softened. You're right, and I'm tired of letting Marcus dictate my choices. If he wants to make an issue of my personal life, let him. I have nothing to hide. The decision settled between them with weight and relief in equal measure. They weren't going to flaunt their relationship, but they weren't going to hide it either. It was a middle ground that felt honest. That evening, Jack picked up Lily from daycare and drove to a park she loved, needing to have an important conversation in a neutral space. They sat on swings while she chattered about her day, and when she finally paused for breath, he spoke. Buttercup, remember when you asked if Evelyn was my girlfriend? Lily's eyes went wide with 4-year-old delight. She is for real. Yes, for real. And I wanted to make sure you're okay with that. She considered this seriously, swinging her legs. Will she be my mom now? The question hit harder than Jack expected. He'd been so focused on his own feelings that he hadn't fully considered Lily's perspective, a child who barely remembered her mother, who might see Evelyn as a replacement rather than an addition. No, sweetheart. You already have a mom. Sarah will always be your mom even though she can't be here. Evelyn is someone I care about who also cares about you, but she's not trying to replace Mommy. Lily thought about this face scrunched in concentration. Can I have a mom in heaven and a Evelyn here? Yes. Hearts are big enough to hold lots of people. Okay. Then I like it. Evelyn is nice, and she gave me Evie. She clutched the stuffed elephant with the hard hat which had become her constant companion alongside the original elephant. Relief washed through Jack. He'd been prepared for confusion or resistance, but Lily's easy acceptance reminded him that children were often more adaptable than adults. She hadn't constructed complicated walls around her heart yet. Love was simple. Either people were kind and safe, or they weren't. They swung in comfortable silence until Lily asked, Can Evelyn come to my birthday party? It's only 23 more days. Jack had almost forgotten Lily would turn 5 in 3 weeks. He'd been planning a small party at the duplex, just a few kids from daycare and Tom's family. Adding Evelyn would make it more complicated, would require explaining to other parents why a billionaire CEO was attending a preschooler's party. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, he couldn't say no. I'll ask her, but you have to understand she's very busy. She might not be able to come. She'll come. She likes us. The simple confidence in those words made Jack's chest tight. Lily was already incorporating Evelyn into her world, already assuming permanence. It was beautiful and terrifying, because if this fell apart, it wouldn't just be Jack's heart breaking. It would be his daughter's, too. That night he texted Evelyn, Lily invited you to her birthday party. 3 weeks from Saturday. No pressure, but she's pretty convinced you'll say yes. The response came quickly. I'd love to. What can I bring? Just yourself. It's low-key kids from daycare pizza cake. Nothing fancy. Sounds perfect. Over the following weeks, Jack and Evelyn navigated the strange territory of actually dating, while Marcus's accusations swirled in business news. The SEC investigation was public now, with articles speculating about Evelyn's leadership and Cross Technology's future. Some coverage was balanced, noting lack of evidence. Some was sensational, treating allegations as facts. Through it all, Evelyn maintained steady presence at work while building her defense with Catherine's help. They kept their relationship relatively quiet, but Jennifer knew she'd orchestrated enough private dinners and schedule adjustments to make her role clear. Tom knew, and through him, the Morrison crew. Ms. Patricia at the daycare figured it out when Evelyn started occasionally doing pickup. They weren't hiding, just not broadcasting. Jack brought Lily to Evelyn's penthouse a few times, testing how their worlds could integrate. Lily was fascinated by the space running from room to room, exclaiming over the views and the fancy bathtub and the refrigerator that had a screen. Evelyn indulged her completely, ordering child-friendly takeout and watching animated movies without complaint. Seeing them curled up on the couch together, Lily explaining plot points with four-year-old logic, while Evelyn listened attentively, Jack felt something settle in his chest. This could work. They could build something real. But then Marcus escalated. Jack was at the Morrison office reviewing bids for upcoming projects when Jim called him into the private conference room. His boss's expression was grim. "We got a letter from Marcus Brooks' attorney." Ice flooded Jack's veins. "What kind of letter, threatening to sue for tortious interference, claims you used your relationship with Evelyn Cross to unfairly secure the renovation contract? Alleges that Morrison Construction wouldn't have been selected without undue influence, which damaged other contractors' ability to compete." Jim slid the letter across the table. "It's bullshit, obviously. We won that bid on merit, but he's trying to create legal trouble that'll cost us money to defend." Jack scanned the legal language rage building with every line. Marcus was attacking not just him, but Jim, who'd given Jack a chance when he was a newly discharged veteran with no civilian construction experience, who'd been patient during those first terrible months after Sarah died, when Jack could barely function. "I'll resign. Tell his attorney I've left Morrison and the claim has no merit." "Like hell you will." Jim's voice was steel. "You're the best foreman I have. I'm not losing you because some corporate asshole is having a tantrum. We'll fight this. It'll cost money, time. Morrison doesn't need that headache. What Morrison needs is to stand up for people who do right by us. You earned that foreman position. You delivered exceptional work. Some rich prick doesn't get to rewrite history because his ego got bruised." Jack wanted to argue to protect Jim from collateral damage, but he also heard the conviction in his boss's voice. This was about principle, now not just practicality. About whether good work and fair dealing mattered or whether power and money could simply overwhelm truth through legal attrition. That evening, Jack told Evelyn about the letter. They were at his duplex, Lily asleep down the hall, speaking in low voices over cold coffee. She listened without interrupting, face growing colder as he detailed Marcus's accusations. "He's coming after everyone connected to you, trying to isolate you by making association costly. It's working. Jim's going to spend money defending a frivolous lawsuit. You're dealing with SEC investigation. I brought this on everyone by not just staying in my lane." "Stop." Her voice was sharp enough to cut through his spiral. "Marcus brought this on everyone by being an abuser who refuses to accept consequences. You didn't cause this. Neither did I. He did. But what if I hadn't rejected him? If you hadn't intervened when he got physical, if we hadn't dared to care about each other." She grabbed his hand, forcing eye contact. "I won't apologize for any of that. And you shouldn't either. What Marcus is doing, this campaign of intimidation and legal harassment, it's exactly why he needs to be stopped. Because he won't just hurt us. He'll hurt anyone who crosses him until someone finally says enough." "So, what do we do?" Evelyn's expression shifted into something harder, more calculating. "We accelerate. Catherine has been building the termination case carefully, but Marcus is forcing our hand. Tomorrow I'm calling an emergency board meeting. I'm presenting everything: the harassment evidence, the financial irregularities, the pattern of retaliation, and I'm demanding immediate termination with cause." "That's risky. You said before that board members support him." "Some did. Past tense. The SEC investigation hurt his standing. And I've been working behind the scenes, talking to board members individually, making sure they understand the liability risk of keeping someone who's generating lawsuits." She squeezed Jack's hand. "I'm done playing defense. Time to end this." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Jack wasn't invited. This was internal Cross Technologies business, but he felt the weight of it anyway. Everything hinged on whether Evelyn could convince 9 powerful people that terminating their COO was necessary, despite the temporary chaos it would create. He spent the day on a different job site, trying to focus on work while checking his phone obsessively. Tom finally confiscated it around noon. "You're going to drive yourself crazy. She'll call when there's news." But the call didn't come until 6:00 p.m., and when it did, Evelyn's voice was shaking. "It's done. 8 votes to 1. Marcus is out. Security escorted him from the building an hour ago." 8 to 1, I thought some of them supported him. Turned out they were more concerned about legal liability than personal loyalty. When Catherine laid out the harassment evidence and showed the pattern of retaliation, including the lawsuit against Morrison, they realized keeping Marcus exposed them to massive damages. Better to cut losses now. Jack heard the exhaustion underneath her words, the toll of months of fighting finally cresting. "How are you?" "Honestly numb. I've been preparing for this confrontation so long that actually winning feels surreal." A pause. "Can I see you tonight? I know it's late and you have Lily, but come over. She'll be asleep soon anyway. We can talk." Evelyn arrived an hour later, still in her business suit, but wilted around the edges. Jack pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than casual feeling tension drained from her frame. They moved to the couch, sitting close, and she told him everything: how Marcus had tried to bluster and threaten, how Catherine had systematically dismantled his defenses, how the board had been unanimous. That termination was the only viable path forward. He looked at me when security walked him out, and he said, "You'll regret this, both of you. I'll make sure you lose everything that matters." Empty threat. He has no power now. Maybe. But people like Marcus don't accept defeat gracefully. He'll find some way to retaliate. Jack tightened his arm around her. "Let him try. We've survived everything he's thrown at us so far. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it." She leaned into him, and for several minutes they just breathed together, processing the magnitude of what had happened. Marcus Brooks had been a presence in their lives for months, a threat, a catalyst, the antagonist driving their story. His removal should have felt victorious, but instead, it felt precarious, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. When Lily's birthday party arrived 2 weeks later, the celebration felt weighted with unspoken relief. Marcus was gone. The SEC investigation continued, but with less public attention, now that he wasn't generating new accusations. Morrison's lawsuit had been quietly withdrawn. Life was stabilizing into something that resembled normal. The duplex filled with excited children, their laughter competing with music from a Bluetooth speaker. Tom and his wife managed crowd control, while Jack handled pizza distribution. Evelyn arrived precisely on time, carrying a wrapped gift that turned out to be a deluxe art supply set. Watercolors and colored pencils and sketch pads, the kind of extravagance that made Jack slightly uncomfortable, but delighted Lily completely. Watching Evelyn interact with the other parents was surreal. She was gracious and friendly, but he saw their calculations, recognizing her from news coverage, wondering what a woman like that was doing at a working-class kid's birthday party. A few approached to introduce themselves, and Evelyn handled it smoothly, deflecting attempts to discuss business by redirecting conversation to the children. During cake, Lily insisted Evelyn sit beside her, and when it came time to make a wish and blow out candles, his daughter squeezed her eyes shut tight, then opened them to look between Jack and Evelyn before blowing. Later, after the party cleared and Lily was crashed on the couch in a sugar coma, Evelyn helped Jack clean up. "What do you think she wished for?" "At 5 years old, probably a pony." She looked at both of us before blowing out the candles. "I think she wished for something else." Jack knew what Evelyn meant. Lily wanted permanence, wanted assurance that the happiness she was experiencing wouldn't disappear, and Jack wanted to provide that. But the future still felt uncertain in ways that had nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with logistics. Two people from different worlds trying to build something sustainable while navigating the complicated reality of a child and careers and expectations. That night after Evelyn left and Lily was properly in bed, Jack sat in the dark living room thinking about wishes and futures. He'd spent 5 years in survival mode, focused purely on the next day and the next. But Evelyn had cracked that open, made him imagine possibilities beyond just getting through. Made him want more. His phone buzzed. Evelyn, thank you for including me today. Watching Lily with her friends, seeing the life you've built for her, it reminded me why I'm fighting so hard to make Cross Technologies a place that actually matters. Because people like you deserve to work without harassment. Because kids like Lily deserve to see their parents treated with dignity. Jack typed back, "You matter too. Not just as CEO, but as a person. Hope you know that." The response took longer. I'm starting to. You help me remember. 3 months after Marcus's termination, the SEC investigation concluded with no charges filed. The findings were clear: allegations had been manufactured without evidence, investigation had been politically motivated, and Evelyn Cross had committed no violations. The announcement made business headlines for a day, then faded into irrelevance. Cross Technologies threw a company celebration ostensibly for the completed renovation, but really marking the end of a nightmare period. Jack attended as Evelyn's date, their relationship now public enough that no one blinked at seeing them together. Jennifer cornered him at the bar. "You're good for her. She's different now, still driven, still brilliant, but more human. Like she remembered there's life outside quarterly reports." "She's good for me, too. Made me remember I'm allowed to want more than just adequate." "Lily seems happy." "She is. Keeps asking when Evelyn's moving in." Jack said it lightly, but the underlying question was real. They'd been dating for 6 months, seeing each other several times a week, but maintaining separate residences. It worked, but increasingly felt like an artificial boundary. Later, dancing slowly while a jazz band played, Evelyn brought it up. "Lily asked me yesterday if I was staying forever or just visiting." "What did you tell her?" "That I wanted to stay. If her daddy was okay with it." Jack's heart hammered. "You want to move in with us? I want to see where this goes without arbitrary walls. I want to wake up next to you more than twice a week. I want to be part of Lily's morning routines and bedtime stories." She pulled back to look at him directly. "But I know that's a big step, especially with a child involved. So if you're not ready, the duplex is too small. And it's not really mine, just a rental. So we find something bigger. Together. A place that's ours." The word ours reverberated. Jack had been ours once before with Sarah, building a shared life, making joint decisions, being a unit. He'd thought that died with her. But here was Evelyn offering to create something new that honored the past while stepping into future. "I want that. But I need you to understand Lily's opinion matters. If she's uncomfortable, we slow down." "Agreed. Let's ask her." They approached it carefully, sitting Lily down for a family conversation. Jack explained that Evelyn wanted to live with them, but only if Lily was happy about it. His daughter considered seriously, then asked the question that mattered most to her. "Will we still have our Saturday morning pancakes, just me and Daddy?" Jack felt his throat tighten at the vulnerability behind those words. Lily was protecting their ritual, making sure new didn't erase what they'd built together. "Always. That's our special time. Evelyn living with us doesn't change what's ours." Satisfied, Lily nodded. "Okay, but she has to help paint my new room, and I get to pick the color." They found a house in Capitol Hill close enough to Lily's school that walking was possible. 4 bedrooms yard with space for a swing-set garage where Jack could store tools. It wasn't Cherry Creek expensive, but it was solid and safe, and theirs. Evelyn sold the penthouse without hesitation, saying it had never felt like home anyway, just a place she slept between work obligations. Moving day was chaos. Tom showed up with his truck, Jim sent a couple crew members to help Jennifer coordinated logistics with terrifying efficiency. Lily supervised from her new bedroom, directing box placement while clutching both elephants. By evening, they were surrounded by cardboard and exhausted ordering pizza because neither adult had energy to cook. Lily fell asleep between them on the new couch, sticky with pizza sauce and happy. Jack looked at Evelyn over his daughter's head, both of them disheveled and tired and more content than fancy celebrations could ever provide. This is real now. No more separate spaces to retreat to when things get hard. Good. I don't want retreat to be an option. I want to work through hard instead of around it. They carried Lily to her new room, walls painted purple per her insistence, and tucked her in. The house was quiet in a way the duplex never had been, insulated and solid. Jack walked through rooms that smelled like fresh paint and new carpet, processing the magnitude of change. Evelyn found him in what would be their bedroom, standing at the window, looking out at Denver lights. Second thoughts, third and fourth thoughts, but not about wanting this, about whether I deserve it, whether I've earned the right to be this happy after everything that happened with Sarah. She moved to stand beside him. Happiness isn't something you earn. It's something you allow yourself to experience. And I think Sarah would want you to allow it. She made me promise to build a good life for Lily, not just adequate good. Then you're keeping your promise. Because Lily is thriving and she gets to see her father in a healthy relationship where people communicate and support each other. That's a gift you're giving her. Jack pulled Evelyn close, resting his chin on top of her head. I love you. Haven't said it directly yet, but I do. I love you too. Have for months, but I was scared to make it real. They stood there until Denver's lights blurred into patterns, two people who'd found each other in a coffee shop confrontation and built something neither had anticipated. It wasn't perfect. They still argued about Evelyn working too much, about Jack being too protective of Lily, about how to balance their vastly different backgrounds. But it was real and honest and worth fighting for. 6 months after moving in together, Jack took Lily to pick out a ring. She was very involved in the selection process, insisting on sapphires because Evelyn likes blue. The jeweler was patient with a 5-year-old's running commentary, and they left with a platinum band set with small sapphires around a central diamond that was modest by Billionaire standards but felt extravagant to Jack. He'd planned an elaborate proposal, something memorable and romantic. But proposals rarely went according to plan. Instead, it happened on a random Tuesday evening. They were in the kitchen, Jack cooking dinner while Evelyn helped Lily with kindergarten homework. Something about the domesticity, the ordinary beauty of their life together, made him realize he didn't want to wait for a perfect moment. He turned from the stove, pulled the ring box from his pocket, and dropped to one knee right there on the kitchen floor, with spaghetti sauce simmering behind him. Evelyn Cross, you walked into my life during one of my worst moments and somehow made everything better. You love my daughter like she's yours. You challenge me and support me and make me want to be better. I can't promise wealth or status, but I can promise to choose you every single day. Will you marry me? Lily shrieked with delight. Evelyn's hand went to her mouth, eyes instantly wet. Yes, obviously, yes. The ring fit perfectly. Lily had been very specific about measurements. They kissed while their daughter cheered and the spaghetti sauce boiled over and smoke detector started beeping. It was chaotic and imperfect and exactly right. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Morningside Brew, the cafe where everything had started. Rachel had closed it for the afternoon decorating, simply with flowers and candles. Just immediate family and close friends. Tom and his family, Jim Morrison, Jennifer, and other Cross Technologies employees who'd become personal friends, Ms. Patricia from the daycare. Lily served as flower girl, taking her role very seriously. Jack wore a suit Tom had helped him pick out, nothing fancy, but well-fitted. Evelyn wore a simple cream dress, elegant without being ostentatious. They wrote their own vows, speaking words that mattered about partnership and respect, and building life together despite different starting points. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lily threw her flowers in the air and yelled, "Now we're a real family!" The reception was held in the completed renovation space at Cross Technologies' full circle from where their professional relationship had begun. Jack stood at those exposed beams he'd fought to keep visible and felt the symbolism structure exposed honest holding. Everything up without pretense. Evelyn found him there during the dancing, pressing close. "What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How unlikely this was. How grateful I am that I didn't ignore what was happening at that table." "Me too. Best decision I never consciously made walking into that cafe on that particular morning." They danced until Lily demanded to join them, and then it was three people moving to music, creating new family traditions. Tom caught Jack's eye from across the room and raised his beer in salute. Jim Morrison beamed with paternal pride. Jennifer was crying happy tears and not bothering to hide it. Later, long after the celebration ended, and Lily was asleep in their guest room, at the house Jack and Evelyn lay in bed, talking about futures, honeymoon plans they were taking Lily because leaving her felt wrong, career trajectories. Jack was being promoted to senior project manager at Morrison. Evelyn was restructuring Cross Technologies' leadership to be more collaborative. Whether they wanted more children, eventually both uncertain but open to possibility. "Do you ever think about that morning?" Evelyn's fingers traced patterns on Jack's chest. "About what would have happened if you'd stayed seated. Marcus would have kept harassing you. I'd have gone to work feeling like a coward, and we'd both have kept living in our separate safe boxes. Some people might say those boxes were simpler. Simple isn't always better. Sometimes complicated is where the good stuff lives." She laughed quietly. "Did you just call our relationship complicated? In the best way. We're complicated like those exposed beams, lots of different strengths supporting each other. Nothing hidden, doing the real work of holding everything together." "That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." They fell asleep, tangled together, and for the first time in years, Jack didn't wake up checking monitors or calculating risks. The hypervigilance that had defined his life since war and loss finally quieted, replaced by something steadier trust that tomorrow would come, and he'd have partners to face it alongside. 15 years passed in accumulation of ordinary days that added up to extraordinary life. Lily grew into a thoughtful 19-year-old home from her first year of college studying engineering because she'd never stopped being fascinated by how things were built. Twin boys arrived when she was 7. Max and Leo, chaos personified but deeply loved. Jack transitioned from project manager to partial owner of Morrison Construction when Jim retired. Evelyn remained CEO, but with better work-life balance, having learned that presence mattered more than hours logged. They returned to Morningside Brew on their anniversary each year, sitting at the same table where Marcus had crossed lines and Jack had intervened. Rachel still managed it, older now, but delighted by their tradition. On their 15th anniversary, they brought all 3 kids, wanting Lily to remember where her family's story had really started. 15 years ago, your dad saved me in this cafe, and then he saved me about 100 more times in different ways." Jack protested. "You saved me just as often, maybe more. We saved each other. That's how real partnership works." Lily, studying psychology alongside engineering, had opinions about their origin story. "You know what's interesting? You both thought you were rescuing each other, but really you were just recognizing each other, seeing what was actually there instead of what surfaces showed." The observation was perceptive enough that both parents paused. Their daughter was right. The connection hadn't been about fixing or saving. It had been about witnessing, being seen completely and choosing to stay anyway. That evening, Jack and Evelyn stood on their back porch while Lily argued good-naturedly with her brothers about superhero physics. Max was convinced that flight was theoretically possible, given enough thrust, while Leo argued about weight distribution. Evelyn had taken up gardening years ago, bringing the same intensity to cultivating roses that she'd once directed at corporate acquisitions. "You look contemplative." Jack pulled her closer. "Just thinking about how one moment of basic human decency in a coffee shop turned into all of this. How easily I could have stayed seated. But you didn't. You stood up, literally and figuratively. Because you were worth standing for. Still are." They watched their family through the window, heard Lily's laughter mix with the twins' excited shouting. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Brooks was living whatever life he'd built after his fall. Jack didn't know and didn't care. That chapter had closed years ago, important only as catalyst for something better. Evelyn leaned against his shoulder, fitting there with the ease of long practice. "Do you ever regret taking that risk on us?" Jack thought about all the complications they'd navigated, the board members who'd doubted the media scrutiny, the challenge of blending such different worlds. Thought about Sarah and the promise he'd made to live fully rather than just survive. Thought about Lily's observation that they'd recognized each other rather than rescued. "Not once. You scared me, still do sometimes. But I'm really glad I was brave enough not to let that fear win." "Me too." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Denver lights spread across the valley. Tomorrow they'd return to their respective work, to the endless demands of career and parenting. But tonight was just this, two people who'd found each other in the middle of someone else's ugliness and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Jack had started out trying to protect his daughter by keeping his world small and controlled. He'd ended up building something bigger than he'd ever imagined simply by being brave enough to let one person in. And that courage to be seen, to be vulnerable, to believe that complicated might lead somewhere worth going, had made all the difference between merely surviving and actually living. The heart he'd learned was capable of holding multiple truths at once. That honoring the past didn't mean being imprisoned by it. That opening yourself to love again wasn't betrayal but continuation. That the strongest structures weren't the ones that hid their support beams, but the ones that left them exposed and honest, doing the real work of holding everything together. In the end, it wasn't about rescue at all. It was about recognition. Two people seeing each other clearly and choosing every single day to stay, to build, to love despite fear and complications and the thousand reasons it shouldn't work. Sometimes complicated was exactly where the good stuff lived.